Then we're going to turn the time over to Melissa.
Okay. Is there like my click through, or I just need to do this?
Yeah, we're having trouble with the click through too. Sorry.
All right. So I'm Melissa Larson. I'm actually a faculty member over at the Marriott School of Business. I teach in the School of Accountancy. And first, let me just say, I love this program. Like, I love the students I love the people I met. I thought, like, meeting different people in the School of Accountancy or in the business school, I learned new things, but turns out it was here. Like, people that thought completely different than I did. And I learned so much and was so grateful for the faculty here as well, as they kind of mentored and helped me. So I'm really happy to be back. Because I'm a faculty member, I decided to do my whole dissertation. The reason I came into this program was to find better ways to serve my students. And when I saw this program, I just knew this would be a way. And so I teach a large enrollment introductory accounting course. That's one of the courses I teach. And I wanted to find ways that I can improve it. So all of my research was related to interventions or ways to improve this class. So to give you just a little bit of kind of course context, this class has an annual enrollment of about 2,500 students. So I teach 2 sections, fall and winter. Each section has about 600 per section. And so we meet over in JSB 140, and it's a blended class. So they do like Tuesdays, they do, or I mean, we say Tuesday, like if this is a Tuesday, Thursday class, they do asynchronous work where they go through and do some modular work. And then in class, we meet in person. I actually bring 600 handouts, paper printed copies, and they pick it up and we go through and do work. I get a lot of flack for people like, why would you bring 600 handouts? Why don't you just put a packet in the bookstore? I was like, well, because they won't buy it. Their laptop will die. Like, I have no reason for not everybody to engage in that moment, because I brought exactly what you need. And that, to me, that's the value in that headache, is that every student can engage every time they come to class. It is a prerequisite for all business majors, minors. It's also across campus. It's required. So we have mixed group of students of what their goals or what their desires are in this class. We also have really high stress levels because it's a prereq for a lot of our limited enrollment programs. So this is kind of to give you context of the class that I was working with. I did a 3-article format. So the first one is I did a literature review, which is still the hardest class I've ever taken in my life. It was hard for me, but Rick West was amazing. Like, every time I'd go to class, he'd remind me that I could do it. And so I would try. And then the next week he would tell me I could do it again. And I learned a ton from that. I now appreciate that maybe the harder the class is, the greater growth comes as well. So lean in maybe more to those classes that you're struggling with. I'm actually going to just talk a little bit about my first and third. My other 2 are research projects. My first one was a literature review. So I'm going to talk about kind of just the first and the third real quick. My first one was, what does the recent literature tell us about pre-class learnings in a flipped classroom? And what can we do to design activities to encourage better preparation? So everybody talks about a flipped classroom, and we know kind of people define that differently. And what does that mean? But I was like, okay, so that means the burden is on the students prior to coming to class, but nobody has what's best practices. So what does that mean? How do we make sure that they're able to get through what they need to so we can have a meaningful in-class experience? So from this literature review, I learned a lot of different things. And as a result of it, we did a redesign of Accounting 200. The way we deployed the class, we redesigned the curriculum using some of the best practices, which turns out there's nothing in accounting, but there was a lot in other disciplines. So I was able to kind of draw from other disciplines, but my background in teaching accounting to redesign it. The third article I'll talk about is we did an intervention where what was happening is a lot of students were withdrawing from this class. And it wasn't just students that were failing, like getting D's, E's, or W's. Oftentimes it was a student that wasn't going to get the B or the A that they needed to apply to their program, which was just really a waste of time and resources, because they'd withdraw and then they just take it the next semester. And that costs them money and it takes up time. And when the deans were talking to me one time about it, I was like, well, wouldn't it be great if they could just retake it in the existing semester? Like our CPA exam for certification, I don't have to take it the first time. I can take it multiple times. We want to just make sure they can do it. So they gave me the go ahead to try this intervention of allowing them to retake exams, because exams make up 60% of the student's grade in our course, and they only have had one attempt. So you get one attempt, and then after the exam, we would hold an in-person review session to give them feedback, because the final's comprehensive. So they needed to know what they missed, and then, so they would be ready. So this was kind of what it was already in place. What we implemented was, after the week of the exam, students had one more week and they could retake the exam 2 more times. We would cap their score at 80% though. So we didn't want to encourage them to think, oh, I'll just go take it, it'll be a practice, and then I'll go retake. They would be capped at 80%. They're not the same exams. So they're different exams. We also didn't want them to just go kind of memorize and then do it again. And so that came really in handy. I used that as my project in Dr. Davies' class with the measurement, that I tested my instrument to make sure I had comparable test questions that would be valuable, that I was testing the students, and they were kind of getting an even attempt on all those exams. So my hypothesis was that the second chance exam would increase student learning. There was some research that said underrepresented groups, or in Accounting 200, that's females. So that's our underrepresented groups, or females. We have some other minority status, but the challenge there is we don't have enough of any one, like the number to really kind of be able to tell. But the idea was, one, would this have a positive effect on them? Or I wanted to make sure it's not harming, it's not creating a greater divide or something. And then we thought it would decrease their anxiety, and we wondered what it would do to their first attempt. Like, we kind of just wanted to understand, what are we increasing or decreasing study skills? My methodology was a quasi-experimental. I had a control group and a treatment group where we did it. We did not use fall 2020 because of COVID. I did a multiple regression. So I just had where I had the second chance exam, and then I just held constant all other demographics about the students to kind of see. The findings, on average, students perform better in the course. So we'd say, of course, if you gave me more chances, of course I would perform better. But this one was a really interesting finding. They performed better on their first attempt. So just having the policy in place, students felt like they weren't such a high stakes. It was an all or nothing. They could actually kind of settle in a little bit more. And then we saw a gender interaction where females actually benefited more, reducing the gender gap. So we saw where our males were performing better, which again is because of this, if you don't have somebody that looks like you or talks like you tend to not associate as much. And so we saw this actually reduce that gender gap. So we saw the equal level of our males and females. We did not see that in first gens, and we did not see that in the other underrepresented groups. It didn't harm them. Everybody did better, but we didn't see an interaction effect. But with that, we've actually now done some more research into, well, what can we do to help our first gen groups? What can we do to help these other groups? What would be, just as a quick example. So here was a student, this was actually a student that came from the Middle East, and actually came from a small school that didn't use a lot of technology, and we were pretty heavily technology involved, and really struggled just to acclimate to being here at BYU. And you can see attempt 1 got a 20%, went up to 55%. Better, and then recapped, and then the final part of this became, we found out you could offer 2 or 3 attempts, but they still have limited time. And very few took the third attempt, but it was there just so that the second attempt wasn't all of a sudden the high stakes. Now this is my last chance. So we see this student would have gotten a C+, ended up getting a B, and has now graduated with in the very next semester, got into the finance program and got a 4.0 through that finance program. So we see like they just needed to acclimate, and they just needed the time to kind of figure it out and get there. Here's an example of a student that actually had a learning disability, which I didn't know till the end, but was committed to keep coming and trying. And I love effort. Like, just in terms of the commitment and the effort level, graduated, finished with a B- instead of a D+, and only needed a C for what their program that they were going for. And so it was kind of nice to see the student examples. The comments, I'm grateful because I feel like I'm learning. This one, I never even took it, but it was helpful to know I could try if I wanted to. It gave me confidence. It gave me hope for the semester. It wasn't just, I've messed up the first time, I can't do anything going forward. I would just add maybe kind of what's the impact looking back. So I attribute this one. So my enrollment this semester is up 350. So I had a waiting list for JSB 140. So that seats 856 students, and I had a waiting list. And I think part of that is the design of the course, that we've made changes that are helping students kind of be successful. A lot of counselors are saying we're recommending it actually pretty early because it's helping them learn how to be better students, because the work at home, they're learning skills on how to, because we built modules based on some of that research. This is exciting to me because the first group, so we have always tried to increase our females in the accounting program. Across the country, it's 50-50. At BYU, we were always 14 to 17%. And our department, probably more than 10 years ago, no, about 10 years ago, made a strategic decision to move me down to accounting 200, so we could maybe have some more females see what it would be like to have somebody in accounting and what they would do. Well, just putting like a female in front of the students, we saw our numbers jump to 24-27% over 2 years. So we saw, but we couldn't get better than that. That's as far as we could get. Well, now we've implemented this. This is our first group coming through that would have had the second chance exams, and our females are up 36%, which we think we're building the confidence in them with the second chance exam, eliminating that interaction effect they were having. So this is really exciting for us that we came up this high. We're hoping, it's a result of some of this research we've been doing. So that's all I have for you. So. I take it back. I had some advice because I was thinking when I was sitting here, for me, if you were doing research, it was out of my element. Like it was not anything I did. I did accounting in practice. So for me, I had to do writing every day. And for me, that was first thing in the morning because that was when I was the best. And plus then I was like, then it's out of the way and I don't have to think about it anymore. But for me, I had to just do it every day. And that would mean sometimes I'd think a lot about it and write like one sentence, and then I would delete it the next day. But I had to do that. I would ask questions early and often. The faculty that helped me were amazing, getting feedback. And this was the most helpful advice that a colleague gave me. Know that your graduate work will be your worst work. And that made me feel so good because I was like, this does feel like this is terrible work. He's like, it is, because you don't know. So you have to just do, and now I look back and think, oh, I would do this so much differently if I'd have known, but you didn't know. So you have to just kind of do it and know you're just going to get better, but you can't get better until you start doing something. So, hey, no more clapping. I'm excited about this.
Okay, my name's Hillari. I just want to say about Melissa, in May, she gave an excellent BYU devotional. And if you have not it's called Christ-like Transformation. If you have not seen it, you should look it up and see it. And it gives excellent insight that makes this project even more personal. Insight into her own experience as an undergrad in accounting, which I thought was really meaningful.
Thank you.
Yeah. So my slides are very boring. And how do you switch them?
You just do the arrow, yeah, space.
So my I just finished the master's program and I did the design track. My project is called Faith for Rights Online Conversion, which is a really boring title. It was a collaboration between myself, the BYU Law School, and the United Nations Office of, it's called the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. So I just call it the Human Rights Office. So I worked with a team of law students and I worked with people from the UN who had written a product, and we wanted to make it better. Well, they wanted to make it better. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So what they had written, so just an explanation for working with the people at the United Nations. These people are very smart. They were international human rights scholars, legal scholars, just really high level academics in the field of human rights and freedom of religion or belief. And people say, well, what was it like to work with them? And I say, the people at the United Nations have a lot of words. They have a lot of words in their head, and all those words come out. All those words come out at you in a conversation. All those words come out on a piece of paper that grows like this, and you got to make sense of the words. That's what it's like to work with the United Nations. So they had written this PDF, and the PDF was called Faith for Rights. And what it was designed and intended to do was to bring together people who wanted to advocate for human rights in a religious realm. So around the world, there are lots of struggles with religion. For example, there are struggles with women's rights, there are struggles with minority rights, there are struggles with incitement to hatred, there are struggles between different factions of different types of religions, and those can cause human rights violations and problems. And what they wanted to do was say, your freedom of religion and your freedom of belief can actually help, not harm, human rights. So they created this very long PDF that had a lot of different activities, but it didn't have any instructional strategy or methodology. So it's a face-to-face learning program. It consisted of 18 learning modules on a variety of human rights and freedom of religion or belief topics, only available in PDF format and intended for use by faith leaders, human rights proponents, and anyone interested in the intersection of religion and human rights. And as we did our analysis, what we found was people would look at it and they would just be overwhelmed at the amount of content. They didn't know how to use it. They didn't know where to start to use it. And it really was only legible by people in the UN Human Rights Office, which is not who they intended it for. So it had a lack of clear instructional methodology. It was a densely worded document. The program intended for groups to come together and be led by a facilitator in these peer-to-peer learning activities, but there was no instruction for the facilitator on how to do it. And there were broad learning objectives with no competencies, and then long lists of unrelated peer-to-peer learning activities. So our objectives, as we looked at it as a team, were to develop a web-based resource based on proven instructional methodology and to develop an online training course for Faith for Rights facilitators. One of the unique things about this project was I was working with these law students, and Jason had told me, when you work with the law students, they're law students and they're going to push back on you and they're going to challenge what you're trying to do. My role as the instructional designer was to teach them how to be instructional designers and to be the project manager for this project, because law students are very smart, but they don't know anything about instructional design. And they weren't there as subject matter experts. They weren't there to give me advice on how to handle the content. They were there in a human rights clinic, which was required for them to take, to make a difference and to help create the product. And so, you know, we as instructional designers, we follow the ADDIE model. There are certain things that we do that law students know nothing about. And so what I set out to do, in addition to creating this, doing the project, was also to be a teacher, to teach them how to do instructional design. We chose first principles of instruction methodology for this project. And the reason we chose this is because it has a nice flow, and also because, well, it's a proven methodology, but every one of the peer-to-peer activities were centered around some kind of human rights problem. So the problems were there, but just the methodology was not there. In order to teach my law students how to apply the methodology, I provided different templates for them. So this is an example of a template where they would apply, they would kind of put the pieces in, they'd take the problem, and then they would, these where it says storytelling and unpacking, those are two different types of activities that were already provided. And then my law students learned how to identify ways that those activities could be modified according to the proven first principles of instruction methodology. The templates were critically helpful to the law students in knowing what to do, how to make sense of something, and how to take those activities and help them to be applicable and useful. One part of first principles of instruction is identifying a progression of problems, starting with something easier and moving to something more difficult. And so I made a template for them to figure out how to do that as well. And then another template to help them to make sure that their work that they were doing was in line with the strategy and in line with instructional design principles. So you can go to the website. What we created is a website. Of the 18 modules, we were able to complete 5 of them. The modules on the website include instructional information on how to use them. We created learning paths. So before, where it was just content, we put the activities in a sequential order so that facilitator can go and say, I want to facilitate a group that learns about women's rights. And they would be able to identify a learning path that would get them to a specific learning objective. The learning paths were comprised of peer-to-peer activities, each focusing on a specific learning objective and competencies. There were no competencies included. There were very broad and kind of abstract objectives, but nothing that said, if someone participates in this group, what will they be able to do? What will they be able to take back to their community? So we created some competencies. We also improved the peer-to-peer activities by adding those competencies, providing step-by-step instructions, providing suggested discussion questions, providing resources specific to the activity, including pre-made slide decks, and then facilitator tips. And then in addition to the modules, we created an online facilitator guide course, which is a self-taught course where they can go online, follow the course, complete the lessons. The lessons contain interactive content, reflection activities, information on how to plan and prepare a Faith for Rights event, how to engage in dialogues and resolve conflicts. And it provided facilitators with information on the history and purpose of the Faith for Rights program, as well as instructional video content. That's the end of my slides. But in addition to, so once I started this project, within about a month, they hired me as a consultant to work on additional Faith for Rights projects. So in addition to this project, I completed a series of in-person instructor-led training workshops across the UK and an additional online resource, and also consulted on an online course with the US Institute for Peace in Washington, DC. And there were some things that I wanted to say about advice. Didn't list them up here, so you just have to listen. One thing that is really notable for me for this particular project is how I came about doing the project. I had been looking for a long time for a project that I felt had some meaning, was interesting to me. I didn't exactly know, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up. And so I wasn't one that came into the program knowing exactly what I wanted to do. My background had been in teaching elementary school and in educational administration. And so I wasn't sure. And so I'd been looking for a long time, and I had stacked my next semester. I was full, and this email came across the IP&T email that said, hey, the law school is looking for this. And they had a really long description. And I thought, oh, that's a really interesting project. It sounds completely overwhelming, and I am too busy. And I disregarded it. And then about 2 days later, I had one of those moments where I woke up at 4 a.m. with an intense feeling that I needed to apply for this particular project. 2 other people had already thrown their hat in, and it looked like it was gone. And then it ended up just sort of falling in my lap. And then after starting it within a month, I was hired by the UN and have had experience that I would never have had. So my advice is take those risks. If something sounds interesting, follow, even if you're too busy, follow it and watch the emails, because the emails are where it's at. As far as my experiences working with people internationally, I've had a lot of really excellent experiences on how to navigate working with people who are coming from different cultures and contexts, how to do instructional design remotely with a significant time difference and significant understanding difference. Very often as instructional designers, people do not know what we do. You know, when I started on some of the other projects working with people in the UK, you know, they thought I was there to be the graphic designer only. They didn't understand what the instructional designer was. So as instructional designers, we have a really good opportunity to teach and help people understand exactly what it takes to create a learning product. Some of the feedback I got from my law students was I had no idea what went into creating a curriculum or creating a program of any kind. And so I really was able to open their eyes to what it is that we do. And they've gained a greater respect for this field because of that. So don't be shy about telling people what you do. You're more than the graphic designer or the teacher. And then the other thing that I had wanted to mention, I can't remember. Just use your resources. And I think Melissa mentioned it. Use the resources of the faculty. And one thing that I really tried to do was create meaning in every single project that I did in the program by applying it to whatever work I was doing. So from the very beginning, I identified in my 560 and 564, I identified a project I could do with my employment, and I applied that to my employment rather than just building a project for no reason. Find something meaningful in every project and build a portfolio of meaningful projects. So that's what I have.
All right, well, I'm happy to be here, and especially with these two women that I've been in classes with for the last few years and have so much respect for. It was so great hearing about your cool projects. So my research, the project that I did for my thesis, I'm going to show you a couple of different things. Okay, so I did 3 main projects while I was here and in the IP&T Masters. And the first one was a project where I worked on the localization of human rights, a human rights manual in Ghana. And the second one was a project about overcoming barriers to faculty adoption of OER. And that was at BYU Hawaii, where I was working at the time. And then the third one was about cultural help-seeking practices in academic communities of engagement. So these are some of the projects. I know you can't see them, but just to show, like, each project kind of I don't know, blossomed is a very cheesy word for it. Like it led to conferences or just different experiences, I would say, and different collaborations. So I want to talk about this, the first one, and this may be the only one I really talk about, but I was sitting in the seminar, and this seminar and on Zoom, and one of the alumni of the program came. Her name is Tiffany Ivan Spence, and she had been working on mobile hotspots for learning in Western Africa, in West Africa. So as I sat in the seminar, I just felt like my brain was on fire. I was so interested in the project that she was doing that it wasn't even over, and I had already written her an email and said, I'm really interested in what you're doing. Is there any way that I could do an internship or learn more from you? And she is a aggregator, connector person. And so she said, yes, absolutely. So I ended up doing, working with her organization, but also with the church. She kind of connected me with the church and their office of human rights. Did you know the church has a Geneva office of human rights? In the big office, Geneva office of human rights, the church has a small office with a few missionaries in it. Mm-hmm. So they had developed this in line with the UN Phase 4 goal to develop human rights curriculum for children and youth. The church had designed a curriculum. In fact, in the Philippines, there are like children television episodes like Mr. Rogers made by the church about human rights. So like it's gone in different directions, but they had a curriculum. But what I met with the directors and they said, here are some problems that we've seen with the curriculum, A, B, C, D. you're just an intern, you're just a student, we're probably not going to use what you're doing, but just see what you can do. Which is the best, right? I had this kind of blank check. They said, pull the team together that you want to work with. Bobby Sandberg was on that team and some different instructional designers, and a group of international students who volunteered from BYU Hawaii from all around the world came and were participants in this. So we developed the pink book, the Human Dignity book. And so that goes through the different, the different principles of human rights. And we created that book. We took it over to Ghana to pilot. I wish I had been friends with Fanny before then. I actually worked with her brother on this. But anyway, so we went over and we're piloting it with the church in gathering places in Ghana. And this is where my research began because of my positionality. Here I am, a white lady in Hawaii, designing human rights content that I'm saying is going to work in Ghana or the Philippines or anywhere. And I felt deeply the problematic nature of that assumption. And so my research question was, what happens when content is designed in one part of the world and gets implemented in another part of the world? How does that content get localized? What are the practices of localization? So, so I went and as we were in Ghana, actually, the people that we met with were eating this up. Ghana is, anyway, so we went around, it's like going to from stake center to stake center. They would invite community members to these gatherings, and facilitators would teach one of the courses, one of the lessons on human rights. And then at the end of this piloting, I just made it like said, does anyone who's facilitated this, would you like to continue to facilitate the course in your area? You would have to gather your own people. You'd have to, you're not really getting any support, but anyone who's interested. And surprisingly to me, there were quite a few. So I ended up over the next year interviewing 11 facilitators who went with this, who ran with it. And as we talked, and this was open educational resources. So it could be used, it could be revised and remixed and localized. But there wasn't necessarily an awareness. Just because someone hands you a manual doesn't mean you're going to revise it, remix it, and all that. So, but as I would talk, and in my interviews, I would talk about what are you doing to change it? And some people would say, well, if I could, I would do this. So became like a phase 2. You can't, this is open educational resources. You can do whatever you want. And that became another part of the project. So the second book is what the facilitators made who were interested in revising and remixing and making the Ghana Human Dignity book. So, so that was my research, and there were kind of 3 main papers that are eventually going to come out of this. So one thing that we found as we watched what was happening in classes, or as we interviewed the facilitators, one way the content gets, the first thing is the experience. It was very eye-opening for me as a teacher, someone who has taught international students for years, to hear people talk about the experience of receiving content that is made somewhere else, a feeling of otherness, a feeling of mismatch. This wasn't made for us. I heard stories about other content that, like literacy content from the church, where they would say the students would stop participating because this isn't for us. But then so that one paper that I haven't written yet that I really want to write is from all these interviews and the experience of getting content that is not from your own culture. And then the article that has been published, I collaborated gratefully with Dr. Jason McDonald. And we talked about the informal practices, because when you don't have access and your technology is problematic, it's hard to get connectivity, consistent connectivity. And so what they would do is just on the fly, they would be localizing the class. And this was based on relationships they had. So if someone in the class has a certain need, they change the curriculum to fit those needs. Some of the classes were done because it was harder and more costly to meet together than it was difficult to get on Zoom and maintain a connection, if that makes sense. Some of them created online gatherings and they had to adapt the content accordingly. This was all done informally. Also, language. This is one of the interesting things that they would, like if you read the literature that's proposing how things should be localized, everything should be translated. But actually in Ghana, I was told by the facilitators, if you translated it into a native dialect, then, and you got to correct me if I'm wrong here, but because of the colonial effort and the national language being English, people can speak the dialect, but are more likely to read in English. So if you were to like just translate everything, you're actually, that's not as helpful to the learner as translation on the fly in the moment, where a facilitator, knowing the person can translate into language. And so those were some of the informal practices. There were also, like you can see here, the formal practices where, interestingly, that what they would do is mostly substitution when they created the course. They didn't change any of the fundamental principles of human rights as they went through, even though not all human rights are protected in Ghana, but they didn't change the principles. Like the core stayed the core, but the pictures changed. The religions that were represented changed, the activities changed, and it was shortened. They revised it to be shorter. So those are some of the things that came from my research. The last picture, so the church did not end up adopting the curriculum, but the Islamic Church in Ghana has adopted it. So all over mosques right now in Ghana, they are using the curriculum we designed, and it's attracted to them. We put it on the EdTech platform. This makes it so that it truly is accessible, and they can, with a click of the button, copy the course and repackage it. So now it's being repackaged with a scripture from the Quran that goes with each lesson, with pictures, so that the people and the stories come from and match a Muslim audience. So those are, I think that's about it. I just won't even go into the other projects, but if I have learned anything, I'll just tell you the joys of research, because I didn't set out to be a researcher, and I really have so much to learn. I have so much to learn about doing research. And I should say, I also want to say, wait, one more thing is one of the collaborations on the middle book where we talk about formal localization. I had the pleasure and benefit of collaborating with Royce Kimmons and Fanny Bonda and to submit an article and to write it up. So that was awesome. But that's one of my joys in research, is collaborating. It's to find people that are your research partners or people that you respect, that you want to learn from, and attach yourself to them or join forces so that you can learn, and so that the research is a collaboration. That makes it joyful to me. The other thing I have appreciated in research is depth. And I think in the hours of diving so deep into this topic, I gained a real appreciation for how much of my life doesn't reach that level of depth. It's probably a good thing, right? But I was grateful for the experience of really getting to that level of depth, being able to read so much of what was out there that I felt like I did call people that I read articles from and had intelligent conversations with them about what they'd written and about the topics that I also cared deeply about. So as you're going deep, and it's hard to get there and hard to do a literature review and all that, take a minute to appreciate the joy and the privilege of getting to that level of depth. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
We have a few minutes if you want to ask questions to Emily or to Melissa or Hillary, either about their projects or their experience in the program. Please feel free to just ask questions.
So question for you, Emily, what was it like, as you're starting like that internship and you built your own team? That seems like to me, where I'm just getting into this program, like a big task to get a team together and to lead that out. What was that like for you? Like getting to that point?
So for me, that was the fun part because pull a team together, I got to work with people that I respected and I just asked different people and they were friends, like this group was friends. I think the great part of that was the international students and interacting with them as we piloted lessons and designed in a participatory way. So I don't know, I was so excited to be doing the project that it didn't feel overwhelming. It felt like it's go time. Let's find the team and get working on this.
Incidentally, on my project, we used Emily's manual as an example. It was meant for children and we were working for adults, but we did consult hers, and I've seen what the church is using now versus hers, and hers is much better.
Yeah, well, we're grateful for these 3 students as well as Kenzie, who's getting video all sent. So let's give them one more round of applause. Well, role models in the program. We hope that you'll have a chance to talk to them and just learn from them. They just did great work, and we really are proud to have them as our alumni now. We conclude our seminar now. Thanks for being here. Next week, we are not in this room for seminar. We are in the Joseph F. Smith building. Go to the east side of the Joseph F. Smith building. There's a spiral staircase that goes up to the Education and Zion Gallery. We're going to do a tour of that. We have a tradition of doing that at the beginning of every school year. So that's our seminar next week. It will not be broadcast next week because we will be over there, but we will come back here for soup afterwards. So thanks again for being here. Thank you to our presenters, our award winners, and we'll see
Did you finish this one? Whatever Jared's project was, I don't know.
Yes.
And so you're taking right now.
Just the 2 design classes.
Yeah.